Tonight, we are not in a hurry. There are no engines, no loud horns cutting through the air, no long metal lines stretching across the land. Just a quiet world, a slow world, a world that moves at the pace of human breath. If you were standing there, somewhere in that distant past, you would notice something almost immediately. The silence. Not the kind of silence we know today. Not the soft hum of electricity in the background, but a deeper silence. A heavier one, broken only by footsteps, by wind brushing against trees, or the distant sound of hooves slowly touching the earth. People did not rush. They couldn't. Because moving from one place to another was never simple. It was a decision, a commitment, sometimes even a risk. Imagine waking up early in the morning. The air is cold, a thin layer of mist still resting on the ground. And you already know today is not just another day. Today, you have to travel. Not far, maybe just to the next town. But even that feels like a journey into the unknown. You prepare slowly. There is no quick packing. No last-minute checking of your phone, no map glowing in your hand. Just a small bag, maybe some food wrapped in cloth, a bottle of water. Mind, will I reach before night? Because night was different back then. Night was not soft. It was not comforting. It was dark. Truly dark. And the roads, they disappeared into it. If you were walking, your journey would begin with a simple step. 1 foot forward, then another, and another. Hours would pass like this. Not quickly, but slowly, very slowly. The road beneath you was not smooth. No perfect paths. No straight lines stretching endlessly ahead. Just uneven ground. Dust, stones, and sometimes nothing that even looked like a road. You wouldn't be alone though. Not always. Sometimes you would see others. A man walking beside his cart, pulling it slowly. A woman carrying something heavy, her steps careful but tired. Or a group of travelers, moving together. Not because they wanted to talk, but because it felt safer. Because out there, on those long, quiet roads, you never really knew what was waiting ahead. Maybe nothing, just more road, more silence, more time. Or maybe something else. Behind the trees, a figure standing, watching, not saying anything. Bandits were real. Not stories, not legends. Real people, waiting for someone like you. Someone alone, someone tired. And suddenly, that slow journey would feel much heavier. Your steps would change. Faster. Shorter. Your eyes, always searching. Even the wind would feel different. If you were lucky, you might have a horse. Not everyone did. Only some. A horse didn't make the journey easy, but it made it possible. Faster, a little more controlled. But still, you were at the mercy of the road. The horse would get tired. You would stop, rest, drink water, wait, and then continue again. Always continuing, always moving forward, but never fast enough. For those who had even less, there were carts, pulled by oxen, or sometimes by horses, heavy, slow, almost painfully slow. The wheels would creak with every movement, wood against wood, a sound that repeated again and again, like a rhythm, a slow, endless rhythm. Inside the cart, goods would be stacked. Food, cloth, simple tools, things that needed to reach another place, another town, another small world, not too far away, but still far enough. Because distance felt different back then. It wasn't measured in kilometers or miles. It was measured in time, in effort, in how many nights you would have to spend away from home. A place just 50 kilometers away could take days. Think about that. Days just to reach a nearby town. And during those days, life didn't stop. It continued around you. Slowly, quietly, you would see fields stretching into the distance, farmers working under the sun, Villages, small, scattered, each one with its own rhythm, its own little world. And that was the thing. People lived in small worlds, very small worlds. Most people never traveled far, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. Their entire life existed within a few miles. The same roads, the same faces, the same stories. Over and over again. And maybe that felt normal. Maybe they didn't feel like they were missing anything. Or maybe, sometimes late at night, they wondered, what's beyond this place? But wondering and going were two very different things. Because going meant time, energy, risk, and not everyone could afford that. Business was slow too, very slow. A trader could not just send goods across the country. There was no next-day delivery, no fast transport. If something needed to be sold, it had to be carried, moved, step by step, wheel by wheel. And that meant limited markets, small reach. A farmer would sell mostly to people nearby. A craftsman would create things for his village, maybe a nearby town. But beyond that, the world remained distant, unreachable. And so, life stayed small, predictable, very slow. Time felt longer. Days stretched. Nights were deeper. And everything but enough to make you unsure. Each step becomes a guess. Then the sounds change. In the day, there were birds, voices, life moving around you. But now, it's different. Quieter, but not peaceful. You hear things, small things, a branch breaking somewhere, far away, or maybe not so far. The wind moving through trees. But somehow, it feels louder now, heavier. And your mind, it starts to imagine. Every shadow feels like something. Every movement feels like someone. You stop for a moment. Just stand there, listening. Nothing. And yet, it doesn't feel like nothing. If you are with others, you might exchange a few quiet words. Not full conversations. Just enough to remind each other, we're still here. Do we stop here? Someone might ask. Softly, carefully. Another voice answers, I don't know. And that's the truth. They really don't know. Stopping means rest. But it also means staying in the dark, in the open, exposed. Continuing means moving, but moving in a world you can barely see. Neither choice feels safe. So you do what people often did. You compromise. Find a place. Not perfect, but good enough. Maybe near a tree or a small clearing. Somewhere the ground feels a little less uncertain. You sit slowly, your body finally noticing the weight of the journey. The hours of walking, the tension, the quiet fear, it all arrives at once. There is no soft bed, no comfort, just the earth. Cold, hard, real. You take a breath, a long one, and for a moment, everything is still. But sleep doesn't come easily. Because even as your body rests, your mind stays awake, listening, always listening. The night has its own rhythm. Slow, unpredictable, a distant sound, then silence, then something again. And in between those sounds, there is a kind of tension, a quiet tension that never fully leaves. Some travelers would take turns staying awake, watching, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. One person rests, another listens, then they switch. A simple system, but necessary. Because danger did not announce itself. It didn't send warnings. It just appeared. And sometimes, it didn't appear at all. Sometimes, the fear itself was enough. Time passes, slowly, very slowly. The night feels longer than the day. And when morning finally begins to return, it doesn't rush. Light slowly, carefully, touches the world again. And with it, something else returns. Relief. A quiet, deep relief. You made it through the night. Nothing happened. Or maybe, nothing that you could see. The journey continues. Again, this was normal. This was life. Travel was not something you enjoyed, not something you planned for excitement. It was something you endured. And because of that, people stayed where they were. They built their lives around what was close, what was reachable. A village, a small town, a few roads that they knew by heart. The same market, the same people, the same stories, year after year. And maybe there was comfort in that. A kind of quiet stability. But also a limitation. Because beyond those familiar roads, there was a much bigger world. Cities they would never see. People they would never meet. Places that felt almost imaginary. Not because they didn't exist, but because reaching them was simply too far. Too slow, too uncertain. And so, the world remained separate. Disconnected. Each place living its own life, moving at its own slow pace. Until one day, very slowly, very quietly, something began to change. Not on the roads, not yet, but somewhere else, far from these silent journeys. A new idea was beginning to form. An idea that would not just make travel faster, but would change everything. But for now, the roads are still quiet. The journeys are still long, and the world remains slow, very slow. And as you listen to this, you can almost feel it, that calm, that heavy stillness, a world moving gently through time, without hurry, without noise, just slow roads and long journeys, sleep. The world was not just slow, it was separated, not by oceans alone, not by mountains or rivers, but by something quieter, something invisible. Distance and time. Two things that no one could escape. You could walk, you could ride, you could try, but no matter what you did, distance remained, and time stretched. If you wanted to send a message, a simple message, not something long, not something complicated, just words, it wasn't easy. You would write it carefully, slowly, each word chosen with thought, because you knew something. This message would take time, a lot of time. There were no instant replies, no quick answers. Once the message left your hand, it disappeared into the world, carried by someone else, a messenger, a traveler, maybe even a stranger. And from that moment on, you could only wait. Days would pass, sometimes weeks, and in that waiting, there was always a question. Did it reach? You had no way of knowing. No confirmation, no signal, just silence. And silence can feel very long. In some cases, the message never arrived, lost on the road, taken, forgotten, or simply delayed by something small. A broken cart, a tired horse, bad weather, little things that turned into big delays. And so communication was never certain, never fast. And that created a quiet kind of frustration. Not loud, not angry, but slow, heavy, the kind that sits in your chest and doesn't leave quickly. Imagine waiting for news, important news, maybe about business, maybe about family, maybe something serious. And every day, you wake up hoping, maybe today. But the day passes, slowly, quietly, and nothing comes, again and again. And it didn't just affect people. It affected everything, business especially. A trader could not think big, not too big, because moving goods was just as slow as moving people, maybe even slower. A cart filled with goods would move carefully, heavily, along those same rough roads. One small problem could stop everything. A wheel breaks, the journey stops. The weather changes, the road becomes mud. Movement slows or stops completely, and time keeps passing. Goods that were fresh start to lose value. Food spoils. Opportunities fade. A deal that could have been made is missed. Not because of bad decisions, but because of time. Too much time. Markets stayed small, local. A farmer sells to nearby people. A craftsman serves his own town. Because reaching beyond that is difficult, risky, slow. And so growth was limited, not by lack of skill, effort, but by distance. Always distance. And time. Even rulers, kings, leaders felt this problem. Because controlling land was not just about owning it. It was about reaching it, sending orders, receiving information, responding quickly. All of it depended on how fast a message could travel, and that speed was very slow. A decision made in one city could take weeks to reach another, and by the time it arrived, the situation might have already changed. Completely. In war, this became even more serious. Armies moved slowly. Messages between commanders took time. Too much time. A small delay could turn into a big mistake. A late message could lead to loss. Not because people were unskilled, but because they were disconnected. Always just a little too far away. Always just a little too late. And slowly, very slowly, people began to feel it. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but quietly. In small moments, in missed chances, in long waits, in that feeling when you know something is possible, but you cannot reach it. That feeling started to grow. A question began to form. Not loudly, not clearly, but it was there. What if there was a faster way? That question, it didn't arrive all at once. No one stood up and suddenly declared, "We need something faster." It wasn't like that. It was quieter, slower. It grew inside people, in small moments, in ordinary days. A merchant standing beside his goods, watching the road, empty. He knows the buyer is coming, or at least he was supposed to, but the road stays silent. The sun moves across the sky, slowly, almost teasing him. The information in his hands belongs to the past, and yet he must follow it, because that's all he has. Time has already outrun him, and there is nothing he can do. These moments, they were everywhere. Not rare, not unusual, just normal. And that's what made it heavier. Because when something becomes normal, people stop questioning it. At least on the surface. But underneath, something was changing. A quiet discomfort. A slow frustration. Not sharp, not explosive, but constant. Like a weight you carry every day until you forget what it feels like to be without it. People began to notice the limits of their world. Not the physical limits, but the invisible ones. The space between places. The time between actions. The delay between intention and result. You want to go somewhere? You must wait. You want to know something? You must wait. Everything required waiting. And slowly, very slowly, that began to feel wrong. Not impossible, just uncomfortable. Because humans, even in the slowest times, have always imagined more. A little faster, a little easier, a little closer. Maybe no one said it out loud, but the thought was there. There must be a better way. Not magic, not something impossible, just something better. A way to move without losing so much time. A way to connect without waiting for weeks. A way to bring distant places just a little closer. And once that thought appears, even quietly, it doesn't disappear. It stays. It grows, slowly, just like everything else in that world. At first, it lives in imagination, in small conversations, in passing ideas. What if roads were smoother? What if horses were faster? What if cars were faster? Simple thoughts. Small improvements, but deep inside, those thoughts point to something bigger. Something not yet clear, not yet visible, but coming. Because every time a journey took too long, every time a message arrived too late, every time an opportunity slipped away, that invisible pressure grew a little more, pushing, quietly, against the limits of the world. And limits, they don't stay forever. Eventually, something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but step by step, idea by idea. Until one day, someone looks at the problem not as something to accept, but something to solve. And that moment, doesn't feel loud. It doesn't shake the world. It almost goes unnoticed. But it matters. Because that is where everything begins. Not with a machine, not with a train, but with a feeling. A simple human feeling. This is too slow. Idea is born. DA. An idea that will take years, decades, even generations to fully become real. But it has already started. Quietly. Somewhere far from these roads. Far from these long journeys. A different kind of thinking is beginning. People are starting to ask new questions. Not just, how do we travel? But, how do we travel faster? And in that question lies the beginning of change. For now, the roads remain the same. The journeys are still long. Messages still take time. The world is still slow. But beneath that slowness, something is moving. Not on the surface, but underneath. An idea, a possibility, waiting, growing, and soon, very soon, it will take its first real form. But for now, just breathe and feel that slow world one more time. The waiting, the distance, the quiet frustration leading to something new, something faster, something that will change everything. Something that will change everything. Sleep. Far away from those long, quiet roads, from travelers walking endlessly, from carts moving slowly through dust. Something else was happening. Not on the surface. Not where people could easily see, but deep underground, in the mines, dark places, heavy places, where the air felt thick and the light barely reached. Men worked there for hours, sometimes for entire days, digging into the earth, searching for something valuable. Coal, black, solid, and strangely powerful. It burned, and when it burned, it gave heat, and that heat was important, very important. But the deeper they dug, the more difficult it became, because the earth had its own way of resisting. Water. Slowly, quietly, it would begin to fill the tunnels. At first just a little, enough to ignore, but over time, it grew. The ground became wet. Dangerous. And then, work would stop. Not because they wanted to stop, but because they had to. Water doesn't wait. It rises. And once it rises enough, the mine becomes useless. All that effort, all that digging, lost. So people started thinking, not loudly, not in big meetings, but quietly among themselves. There must be a way to remove the water. Buckets were used. Men lifting water, again and again and again. But it was slow, too slow. The deeper the mine, the more water. And the more water, the more impossible it became. This wasn't just a problem, it was a limit, a wall, standing in front of progress. And walls make people think. Not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly. Someone, somewhere, looked at boiling water. Maybe in a simple pot, maybe in a quiet moment, and noticed something small. When water gets hot, it changes. It doesn't stay still. It moves. It rises. It pushes. Steam. For most people, it was nothing special, just a normal part of life. But for a few, it became a question. Can this be used? Not just for heat, but for work. And that question didn't create an answer immediately. It stayed. It waited, until one man decided to try. Thomas Newcomen. He wasn't trying to build a train. That idea didn't even exist yet. He just wanted to solve a problem. A simple one. Remove water from mines. But the solution he worked on was anything that's simple. It took time, years, trial, error, failure, again and again, until slowly something began to take shape. A machine. Large, heavy, not beautiful, not elegant, but functional. It worked with heat. Water was heated until it turned into steam, and that steam filled a chamber. Now here's the quiet magic. Steam takes up more space than water. Much more. And when it expands, it pushes. It creates pressure, and that pressure can move things, push them, pull them. In Newcomen's engine, that pressure was used to move a piston, up, and down. Slowly, steadily, and that movement was connected to a pump. A simple idea, but powerful, because now, instead of men lifting water, a machine could do it. Not perfectly, not quickly, without getting tired. For the first time, steam was no longer just a curiosity. It became useful, quietly useful. And in the beginning, not many people noticed. It didn't change the world overnight. It didn't spread everywhere. It just stayed there in the mines, working slowly, reliably, removing water, solving a problem. But sometimes, the smallest solutions become the biggest changes, not because they are loud, but because they work. And this one worked. It was not perfect. It used a lot of fuel. It was inefficient. But it was a beginning. And beginnings don't need to be perfect. They just need to exist. And now, something existed. A machine that turned heat into motion. And motion is where everything begins to change. But that change was still far away. For now, the machine stayed in one place. Heavy, still, doing its job, quietly, while the world above remained the same. Slow roads, long journeys, no trains, not yet. But deep underground, a new kind of power had been born. And it was only the beginning. The machine worked, but not perfectly. It was heavy, slow, and hungry. Hungry for fuel. Coal had to be burned, again and again, just to keep it moving. And even then, it wasted energy. A lot of it. Most people would have stopped there. They would have said, "This is enough. It solves the problem. Water is removed. The mines continue. Why change anything?" But progress rarely stops like that. Because somewhere, there is always someone who looks at something working and quietly thinks, "This could be better." And that someone arrived. James Watt. He didn't rush. He didn't try to rebuild everything at once. He observed, carefully. Watched how the engine moved, how it breathed, in its own mechanical way. Steam entering, steam leaving, heat rising, energy disappearing. And that's what he noticed. Energy was being lost, not used, wasted in small moments, over and over again. And instead of building something new, he focused on something smaller. Improvement. A simple idea, but powerful. What if the engine didn't have to heat and cool the same space again and again? What if that process could be separated? It sounds small, almost unimportant, but sometimes small changes create big shifts. Watt introduced a separate condenser, a different place for the steam to cool. So the main chamber could stay hot. Always ready, always efficient. No repeated heating, no unnecessary loss. And suddenly, the engine changed. Not in appearance. It still looked heavy, still looked slow. But inside, something was different. It became more efficient. It used less fuel, produced more work, and most importantly, it became reliable. Something people could trust. This didn't happen in a day or a year. It took time, experiments, mistakes, adjustments, small improvements layered one over another, until the machine felt complete, or at least complete enough. And now, something interesting began to happen. The steam engine started to move. Not physically, not yet, but in people's minds. Because once a machine becomes reliable, people start asking new questions, not just, what can it do, but where else can it be used? Factories began to notice. Workshops, mills, places where human effort was slow, limited, tiring. And suddenly, this machine offered something different. Consistency. It didn't get tired. It didn't need rest. It just worked, hour after hour. And slowly, very slowly, steam power left the mines. It entered the world above, into factories, into production, turning wheels, moving machines, helping create more in less time. And that's when something deeper changed. Not just in machines, but in thinking. Because now, people had seen it. They had seen a force, invisible yet powerful, turn into motion. Controlled motion. And once you control motion, you begin to imagine movement. Real movement. Across distance. Across land. The idea was still unclear. Still distant. But it was there. A quiet possibility. If this machine can move parts, can it move itself? A strange thought. At first. Almost unrealistic. Because the engine was still heavy, still large, built to stay in one place. But ideas don't care about size. They grow. Slowly. Just like everything else in that time. Years passed. More improvements came. Better designs, stronger materials, more understanding. And with each step, the impossible started to feel a little less impossible. Still far, still uncertain, but closer. Much closer than before. From the early 1700s, when the first rough engine appeared, to the later years, when Watt refined it. Decades had passed. Generations had worked on this idea. Quietly, without knowing what it would become. They weren't trying to change the world. They were just solving problems, one by one. Water in mines, energy loss, efficiency, simple things. But when simple solutions connect together, they create something bigger. Something no one could fully see in the beginning. And now, as steam engines quietly worked in different parts of the world, a new question was ready to be asked. Not about water, not about factories, but about distance. The same distance that once felt impossible. The same slow roads, the same long journeys, the same world we left behind. Because now, there was a new kind of power. A power that could move. Not just machines, but maybe, one day, people. And when that thought finally connects, the world begins to change. But slowly. Always slowly. For now, the engines continue to breathe quietly. Steam rising, falling. A rhythm, soft, steady, like a heart, preparing for something greater. And somewhere, someone is already thinking, what if this could move on wheels? By now, something had changed. Not on the roads, not in the long journeys. Those were still the same. Slow, quiet, uncertain. But somewhere else, far from those dusty paths, the world was beginning to feel different. Not louder, not faster, but busier. Inside buildings, large ones, filled with movement. Factories. Places that didn't exist in the same way before. Places where work never really stopped. And at the center of it all, there was something new. Something breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. Steam engines. Not the early ones, not the rough, heavy beginnings, but improved, refined. Thanks to minds that kept working, kept adjusting, kept asking, can this be better? And now, it was. Machines inside factories no longer depended only on people. They moved because something else was moving them. Wheels turned. Day and night, without complaint. And for the first time, production began to change. Not slowly, but steadily. More goods could be made in less time. Cloth, tools, materials, things that once took days or weeks to create, now appeared faster, more frequently. And at first, this felt like progress. A quiet kind of success. More work being done, more things being made. But progress always brings new problems. Quietly, slowly. Because making things is only part of the story. The rest is moving them. And that part had not changed. Not yet. Outside the factories, the roads were still the same. Uneven, dusty, long. Carts still moved slowly. Animals still pulled heavy loads. And suddenly, something felt off. Everything was faster, more efficient. But outside, nothing had changed. The goods were ready. But they couldn't go anywhere. not quickly, not in large amounts, and that created a strange imbalance. Factories could produce more than the roads could handle, more than the old systems could carry. And slowly, very slowly, this became a problem. Not a loud one, not a sudden one, but a growing one. Goods started to wait, stacked, stored, ready to move, but unable to. A merchant stands there, looking at rows of finished products, cloth folded neatly, tools arranged carefully. Everything ready. And yet, nothing moving. He knows the demand is there. Somewhere else, far away. People need these things. But reaching them still takes time. Too much time. Cart can only carry so much. A horse can only go so far. And every journey comes with limits.
Still feels like a burden.
Heavy, slow, unpredictable. So again, that feeling returns. The same one we felt before. That quiet frustration. But this time, it's stronger. Because now, people have seen speed. They have seen what machines can do. They have felt efficiency. And once you experience something faster, it becomes harder to accept something slow. A question begins to rise again. Not new, but clearer now. More focused. If machines can make things faster, a pause, can they move things faster too? It sounds simple, almost obvious, but at that time it wasn't. Because machines were still seen as stationary. They stayed in one place. They powered things, but they didn't travel. Movement still belonged to people, to animals, to roads. But ideas, they don't stay fixed. They move. Slowly, quietly, from one mind to another. Someone, somewhere, looked at a steam engine and imagined something unusual. Not a machine in a factory, but a machine on the ground, moving, carrying something. Maybe goods, maybe people. The idea was not clear yet, not fully formed, but it was there, a small spark. And sparks, if given time, can grow. But not instantly, not dramatically. Because new ideas, especially ones that challenge everything, they take time. Time to be understood. Time to be accepted. Time to be built. For now, the factories continue. Steam engines breathe. Machines move. Goods are created. And outside, the roads remain unchanged. Still slow, still heavy, still waiting for something new. Something that hasn't arrived yet, but is getting closer. Very slowly. That small idea, it didn't spread quickly.
It didn't become a big discussion.
Most people didn't even notice it, because it lived quietly inside a few minds. People who had seen machines closely, who understood how they moved, how they worked, how they breathed. They stood near these engines, watching them again and again. The slow rise of steam, the steady push of pressure, the rhythm, almost like something alive. And somewhere in that rhythm, a thought returned. What if? What if this movement didn't stay in one place? What if, instead of turning wheels inside a factory, it turned wheels on the ground? The idea felt strange, uncomfortable, almost impossible. Because these machines were not small. They were heavy, very heavy, built from iron, solid, unforgiving. How could something like that move? And even if it could, where would it go? Because now, instead of forcing machines to fit the world, people began to imagine changing the world to fit the machine. A subtle shift, but powerful. If the road is too rough, make a smoother path. If the ground is uneven, create a fixed line. Something stable, something strong, something that could carry weight without breaking. And slowly, very slowly, another idea began to form. Not just a moving machine, but a path made for it. At first, these were simple tracks, wooden, rough, used in mines to guide carts. not for speed, just for direction. But even there, something interesting happened. Carts on tracks moved easier, needed less effort, less force, more movement. A small observation, but important, because now, two ideas were beginning to connect: steam power and guided paths, a machine that could move and a surface that could support it. Still separate, still incomplete, but closer, much closer. And in that space between what exists and what could exist, imagination grows. Someone looks at a track, then looks at an engine, and for a moment, just a brief moment, they see it. Not clearly, not perfectly, but enough. A machine moving along a fixed path, carrying weight, not slowly like a cart, but powered, driven, alive in motion. The idea is still fragile, easy to dismiss, easy to doubt. Too heavy, too difficult, too risky. And maybe all of that is true. But ideas don't disappear that easily. Once seen, even for a second, they stay. To believe in them enough. To try. Not perfectly. Not successfully at first. But to try. And that's how everything begins. Not with certainty, but with curiosity. With a question that refuses to go away. Can this actually work? For now, there are no trains, no long Gelées lines stretching across land, no engines pulling weight over distance. Just thoughts, ideas, small experiments, yet to happen. But the foundation is already there. Steam has proven its power. Tracks have proven their strength. And now, only one thing remains: to bring them together. And when that happens, the slow world we've been walking through will begin to change. Not all at once, but in a way that cannot be undone. For now, just rest in that moment, that quiet space before something new is born. Still slow. The roads are still long, but somewhere, someone is already preparing to place a machine on a path and let it move. Sleep. For a long time, it was only an idea. A quiet thought, moving from one mind to another. A machine on a path. But ideas, no matter how powerful, mean nothing until someone tries. And eventually, someone did. George Stephenson. He was not born into greatness. Not a famous scientist, not a wealthy inventor. Just a man who worked with machines, who listened to them, understood them, who had spent years watching engines breathe, watching metal move, watching small improvements turn into something real. And somewhere along that journey, he saw it. Not just a machine, not just a track, but both together. A connection others had not fully believed in yet. And unlike many, he didn't just imagine it. He decided to build it. Slowly, carefully, without certainty, without guarantees, and the patience to follow it. The early attempts were not impressive. Heavy machines, placed on simple tracks, trying to move. Sometimes they did. A little. Then stopped. Something broke. Something failed. And that was expected, because nothing like this had been done before. There were no clear instructions, no perfect designs, just trial and error. Again and again and again. Days turned into months, months into years. And still, the progress felt slow, almost invisible. But something was happening. With each failure, a small lesson was learned. A weak part was strengthened. A design was adjusted. The machine improved. Not suddenly, but quietly. And that quiet improvement was everything. In 1814, after years of effort, Stephenson created something different. A locomotive. Not perfect, not fast, but real. It could move, not just parts inside a factory, not just a pump in a mine, but itself, along a track, carrying weight. This was new. Truly new. For the first time, steam power was not standing still. It was traveling. Slowly, steadily, but moving. And that movement changed something. Not everywhere, not immediately, but in the minds of those who saw it. Because now the question was no longer, is this possible? That question had been answered. The new question became, how far can this go? Still, many people doubted it. They looked at the machine and saw problems. Too heavy, too complex, too dangerous. Some believed it would never replace horses, that it was just a strange experiment, something interesting, but not practical. In that moment, it did seem that way. Because the speed was not impressive, the movement was not smooth, and the future was unclear. But progress doesn't need belief from everyone. It only needs a few people to keep going. And Stevenson kept going, improving, adjusting, testing. Each version a little better, a little stronger, a little closer to something reliable. And slowly, the machine began to earn trust. Not all at once, but step by step, because people could see it, hear it, feel it, the sound of metal on metal, the rhythm of movement, the steady push forward. Something about it felt different, not natural, but powerful. And once that feeling appears, it spreads, quietly, from one person to another, until more and more people begin to pay attention. And then something important happens. Not just a machine, but a system is created. A real path, a real purpose, a real journey. But that moment is just ahead. Very close now. For now, the machine continues moving slowly on its track, testing the limits of what the world thought was possible. And with every small movement, the slow world we once knew begins to shift. Just a little. Sleep. For a while, it was still uncertain. The machine could move, yes, but could it become something more? Could it carry not just weight, but purpose? Could it become part of everyday life? These questions did not have quick answers. But in 1825, something happened. Something quiet, yet deeply important. Opened. Not just a short experiment. Not just a private test. A real railway, built for use. Built for people. Built for movement. And on that railway, Stevenson's locomotive was ready. The day was not loud, not dramatic, no grand celebration, no sense of history being made. Just people gathered quietly, curious, unsure, watching. The machine stood there, heavy, silent, almost still, as if waiting. Some looked at it with excitement, others with doubt, a few with fear, because this was new, unfamiliar. A machine that moved on its own, along iron tracks, pulling weight behind it. For many, it didn't feel natural. It felt strange. And sometimes strange things can be uncomfortable. A man standing nearby might whisper. Another replies quietly, I don't know. And that uncertainty filled the air. Not loud, but present. Then, slowly, the engine came alive. A soft release of steam. A low, steady sound. Not aggressive. Not fast. Just movement. The wheels began to turn. Metal against metal. A rhythm. Steady, predictable. And just like that, it moved. Forward. Not quickly. Not perfectly. But undeniably. It was moving. And behind it, the wagons followed. Pulled along the track. Carrying goods. Carrying weight. And in that moment, something changed. Not in the machine, but in the people watching. Because they could see it now. Not as an idea, not as an experiment, but as reality. A machine, moving across land, carrying load, without horses, without human pulling. Just power, controlled, directed. And something about that felt powerful, quietly powerful. Some stood still, watching as it passed, their eyes following the movement, trying to understand what they were seeing. Because even though it was slow, it meant something. It meant distance could change. It meant time could change. And even if they didn't fully realize it yet, they felt it. A small shift, a beginning of something bigger. After that day, the machine did not disappear. It continued. More journeys, more improvements, more tracks being built. Slowly, very slowly, the idea spread. Not everywhere, not instantly, but steadily, like everything else in that time. And along those tracks, machines moved. Not perfectly, not yet, but enough. Enough to prove that the world didn't have to stay slow. That distance was not fixed. That time could be shortened. And once that realization settles, it doesn't go away. It grows, it spreads, until the slow world we once knew begins to fade. Not disappear completely, but change, forever. And it all started with that moment. A quiet railway, a moving engine, a small crowd watching something new, without fully understanding that they were witnessing the beginning of a different world. After that first movement, the world did not change overnight. There was no sudden transformation, no instant speed, just small shifts, quiet expansions. Railways began to grow. Not everywhere, but in places where people believed that movement could be different. At first, they connected short distances, one town to another. Not very far, not very fast, but enough. Enough to prove something important. That this was not temporary. This was not an experiment anymore. It was becoming a system. Tracks stretched slowly, across fields, through small towns along quiet landscapes. Iron lines cutting gently through the earth. And along those lines, machines moved. Again and again, carrying goods, carrying people, carrying stories. At first, people were still unsure. Sitting inside these moving wagons felt unusual. The ground moving beneath them, steady rhythm, the unfamiliar sound. Some felt excitement, others a quiet fear. Because speed, even a little, can feel strange when you're not used to it. But slowly, that feeling began to change. The more people traveled, the more normal it became. The fear faded, and something else replaced it. Comfort. A new kind of comfort, because journeys were no longer as long. What once took days, now took less. Still not fast, by modern standards, but faster than before. And that difference mattered a lot. Letters began to arrive sooner. Goods reached markets before losing value. People could travel without feeling lost for too long. And slowly, distance itself began to feel smaller, not physically, but emotionally. Places that once felt like another world, reachable. But gradually, because now they were connected. Goods could enter, people could arrive, ideas could travel. And when ideas travel, everything changes. Cultures meet, stories mix, new ways of thinking appear. All because movement became easier, and time became shorter. The slow world we began this journey with did not disappear. It still exists, in quiet roads, in distant places, in moments where everything feels still. But alongside it, another world emerged, a moving world, a connected world, a world where distance no longer feels as heavy. And it all began with simple questions. Can this move? Can this be faster? Questions that felt small at the time, but changed everything. Now, when we look at trains, modern ones, fast ones, crossing cities in moments, it's easy to forget how slow it all started. How uncertain it was. How quiet those first steps were. A machine, barely moving. A few people watching, unsure of what they were seeing. And yet, from that quiet beginning, came a world that never stopped moving. Now, as you rest, think about that journey. From slow roads to moving machines. From isolation to connection. Not rushed, not forced, but built step by step. Just like this story. Slow, steady, quiet. And now, everything is calm again. The movement fades. The sound softens. The world becomes still. And you can rest. Sleep. And even now, if you listen carefully, you can still hear it. Not the loud sound. Not the modern engines. Not the rush of fast travel. But something older. Something softer. The first rhythm. The early movement. A slow engine moving along iron tracks. Somewhere far away. Almost like a memory. Because in many ways, that's what it is. A memory of change. A moment when the world decided to move forward. But not in a hurry. Never in a hurry. Because real change doesn't rush. It builds. Quietly. Layer by layer. Like tracks being placed one piece at a time. Carefully. With intention. And if you imagine it now, a long railway stretching into the distance, disappearing into soft light, you might feel something. Not excitement, not tension, but calm, a sense of direction. A feeling that everything is going somewhere, even if slowly, even if quietly. And maybe that's why trains feel different, even today, because they don't just move fast. They follow a path, a clear one. No confusion, no wandering, just forward, steady, certain. And in a strange way, that feeling can be comforting. To know that something knows where it's going, even when we don't. The early travelers must have felt that too. Sitting quietly, watching the world pass by, fields, trees, small towns, everything moving while they stayed still. Or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe they were the ones moving, and the world was standing still. It's hard to tell, and maybe it doesn't matter, because in that moment, there was peace, a different kind of journey. Not just reaching a place, but experiencing the path, feeling the rhythm, letting the movement carry you. And now, as you lie still, listening to this story, you are not so different. You've traveled too, from a slow world to a moving one, from long roads to endless tracks, from questions to answers. And now, back to stillness. Because every journey, no matter how long, eventually slows down, eventually becomes quiet. Just like this. The tracks fade, the engine rests, the movement stops, and all that remains is calm. A soft silence, where nothing needs to move anymore. Nothing needs to change. Everything is enough. Right here, right now. So let the world be still again. Let the roads be empty. Let the tracks fade into the distance. And let your thoughts slow down, just like everything else. There is nowhere to go. Nothing to reach, no journey to finish. Just rest, just quiet, just sleep. Somewhere, far away, a train is still moving. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. You don't see it, but you can imagine it. A long track, stretching endlessly. Through darkness, through silence, through a world that no longer feels rushed. The engine breathes softly, a gentle rhythm in the distance. Like a heartbeat, calm, predictable, safe. And inside that train, there is no noise, no crowd, no pressure. Just quiet, soft light, and a window beside you. Outside, nothing is rushing. The world moves slowly, almost like it's waiting for you to rest. You don't need to go anywhere. You're already on the journey. And the journey doesn't end. It doesn't need to. Because this train, it doesn't rush to arrive. It moves just enough to keep you calm. Just enough to carry you further away from everything heavy. Every worry, every thought, every noise. Left behind, one by one. Fading, like distant tracks, disappearing into the night. And now there's nothing left to hold on to. Nothing left to think about. Just the rhythm. That soft, steady rhythm. The train moves, and with it, your thoughts slow down. Your body relaxes. Your breathing softens. In, out, like the engine, like the track. Peaceful. And somewhere, very softly, the story begins again. A slow world, quiet roads, long journeys before the trains, before the movement, before everything changed. And as that story returns, you don't need to follow it. You don't need to listen, because now you're already drifting. Far from the noise, far from the rush, carried gently by something steady, something calm, something endless. The train continues, the world stays quiet, and you finally rest, sleep. The night is quiet, the train moves, slowly, softly, every wheel, every track, every sound blends together into a single rhythm, a rhythm that carries you through fields of darkness, through forests of calm, across rivers of silence, and you float, not thinking, not worrying, just drifting. The soft hiss of steam, the metal-on-metal sound becomes a lullaby, not loud, not sharp, but constant, steady, reliable, like the heartbeat of the world itself. And as you breathe, the rhythm matches yours. In, out, in, out. The journey is endless, yet comforting, because you know, no rush, no pressure. Only the train, moving, and the world moves with it. Even when it seems still, even when all else fades, the tracks stretch forever, into soft darkness, into quiet light, into nothing you need to follow. Already there. Already part of the journey. Already drifting. The train carries everything, every thought, every worry, every lingering sound far away, leaving only calm, only peace, only quiet. And now, as you feel that, you can let go completely. No need to move, no need to think, no need to do anything. The train moves, the world moves, and you finally rest, sleep, drift, fade, endless, calm, quiet, hypnotic sleep.